Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois. And we have got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking with Chelsea Harbach all about, the things that go creep in the soil, nematodes, and a couple other things with crop diseases and so on. So we're excited to talk to Chelsea today. But before we get to Chelsea, we have to introduce our co-host with us every single week. We are joined by local foods educator and small farms educator. Did I say that wrong, Katie? Oh, shoot. I messed it up.
I'm all kinds of educators.
I was on a run.
That's okay. We'll accept it.
All right. Local food systems, small farms educator, Katie Parker and Quincy. Hi, Katie.
There you go. Hey, Chris, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm sorry. I got tongue twisted there. I had been doing so good for like a month or two.
Yeah, you've been doing really well.
Sorry.
Have you been working outside today?
I wish I was. It feels like spring right now.
Yeah, it's
almost
nice.
Summer. It feels rainy. It's a southerly wind. There's a lot of humidity to it.
Mm-hmm.
I keep checking the weather. Still no rain, at least predicted for where I'm at. How about you?
I didn't notice anything so far. It's just wind, but tomorrow it says it's supposed to be 72.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the day we all need to like take a vacation day or something and go do some work at home. Yeah. And then it will I think it's by Saturday. So if that's happening Wednesday, by Saturday, we are down in the teens once again. So
yeah, hopefully we can get a white Christmas. That would be nice to have.
I love those. Those are some of my favorite to have. So
yeah, with that cooler weather, maybe that'll give us a better chance.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Definitely. So Katie, do you know, we're going to talk with Chelsea about nematodes. Did you study nematodes? More than likely, right?
So I mean, soybean cyst nematode is a big one in agriculture. Okay. So that's one that I'm familiar with. And then more so in horticulture, we have root knot nematode, correct? Mm-hmm. That's all. Actually, so I don't know if you know, but Dr. Gruber's late wife was a nematologist. And she came and spoke to us one year when I was in school and taking one of Dr. Gruber's soils classes. And she just had a wealth of knowledge. It was crazy to listen to her talk. But that's my extent of nematodes. What about you?
So that triggered your excitement for nematology. I'm going into this one blind, Katie. What's a nematode is literally what we're going to ask here in a little bit. Because I mean, as far as I know, they're like from the movie Tremors, like the big worms, but these guys are microscopic. That's right. Kind of what I'm going with here. So they're burrowing through the soil. They're going to come up and they're going to eat our trucks. I don't know.
Well, if I remember correctly, in one of our textbooks in college, it was either we're all covered in nematodes or we're all covered in microbes. Chelsea will have to. She'll
have to determine.
She's
what
saying
the answer
number
is.
two. We're all covered in microbes, which is kind of disgusting.
We're just a big bag of bacteria and fungi.
Right. If we were all just to disappear today, we would still be like outlined by soil microbes. That's what the textbook said.
Well, I think, okay, so we have to dispel some of these things. So I think without further ado, let us introduce Dr. Chelsea Harbach, the commercial ag educator with University of Illinois Extension. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Katie. Thanks, guys, for having me.
So we're covered in what? What are we covered in, Chelsea?
We're covered in microbes. We're like, we're covered in microbes. We've got microbes all in our like gastrointestinal system. Microbes are all around us, all over us, and just everywhere.
So if we're covered in microbes, why don't they eat our dead skin, or do they eat dead skin?
There are some microbes that kind of like eat away at like the detritus that we shed.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad they're doing something while they're sitting on me. So
yeah,
you got a job.
Yeah, I mean, if they're like, what's the word, like neutral, right? Like it's not like they're hurting you or anything,
right?
You would know if they were hurting you,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I just in this conversation, I'm thinking of a shout out to Steve Wald, who's our government relations here at Extension. His wife studies the microbiome, and he's talked about some really interesting things that her team has uncovered. So yeah, maybe we'll have Steve on sometime, so then we can talk to his wife about microbiomes.
100%, because
Yeah.
I mean, plants have microbiomes too. I mean, like every living organism has microbiomes.
That's really fascinating. You don't think about, we live in the macro, right? We don't see the things that are crawling on our skin right now.
Yeah.
That are beneficial. They're eating dead
Mm-hmm.
skin cells and probably defending us from more harmful
diseases and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I guess in light of that, Chelsea, tell us a bit about yourself and your background. What are you doing here at Extension?
So my background is kind of all over the place. I like grew up thinking, like, I love animals, and I still like am super passionate about animals, and I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian for the longest time. And so I went to college thinking that I was going to go to vet school. And then like halfway through, I think it was my freshman year, I took a course called Companion Animals in Society. And I never thought I would cry in a college class, but I like was bawling because we watched these documentaries about like dog fighting and animal shelters. And so like actually like literally watching animals die, and I'm bawling, and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have the emotional constitution for this. And so I took an ecology class, and I thought ecology sounded kind of cool. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll like get into ecology. But then that didn't seem quite like relevant enough for me. And so then I kind of decided to go back to my roots, pun intended. So I grew up on a farm. I had no interest in agriculture growing up, but I grew up on a farm and decided to study crop sciences. I had no idea what I wanted to do with that degree. I like my first semester had to talk about glyphosate, and I was like still had no idea what I was talking about. Like that's how unfamiliar with agriculture I was. And then my second semester into crop sciences, I was told I had to take this class called plant pathology. I was like, I have no idea what plant pathology is, but I have to take it. Here I go. And it turned out to be like this perfect like crossroads for me between like agriculture, biology, microbiology, and just like plants in general. And like for me, it kind of like provided this avenue of like taking care of sick things, but like not like sick things that don't have feelings that we can perceive, right?
Yes.
I mean, and that also gets a little complicated because obviously some people have emotional attachments to plants. So like when you're taking care of somebody's like beloved house plant or a memorial plant or something, like that can get a little more complicated. But I just fell in love with plant pathology. And so I decided to pursue a graduate degree. I got my master's degree at U of I. And while working on my master's, I interned at the plant clinic at Illinois for a summer. So I got to spend a whole summer being a plant doctor. And I also like fell in love with extension too, like the general concept of extension, providing like unbiased research-based information to people. I just saw so much value in that. And so I went on to get my PhD at Iowa State University in the Department of Plant Pathology and Microbiology. I worked there exclusively with the soybean cyst nematode, and was looking for jobs that let me continue doing stuff with plant diseases, but also get my hand in extension and have an impact that way. So here I am, and I've been here since August of 2019.
And it's been the best 2 years of your life, right?
Yeah, it's been a crazy. I mean, you guys have lived. It's been an interesting time, but we got through it. We're innovating. We're doing awesome things.
So Chelsea, you are stationed out of the Monmouth Research Farm. What
Yep.
is it that you do at that facility?
So it's a crop sciences research farm. So there's, most of the research that's going on there is conducted by faculty at from crop sciences. There's also like partnerships with industry, with like plots out there to provide data back to companies that want more trials put out and around, to have those data. So what I get to do is, well, this year I got to run a few different trials of my own with nematodes, and then I'm actually collaborating with a USDA plant pathologist working with a mycovirus that parasitizes Sclerotinia sclerotinia, which is the causal agent of white mold that affects many different plants, including soybeans. So that's what I do. I'm doing, research stuff there. And then it's just kind of like my home base for any like storing stuff. I've got an office there, but I have an office at home now. So I'm kind of all over the place.
When you are going, so say, what was the name of the white mold for soybean? Or is that the name?
Yeah, it's called white mold. The disease is called white mold. You don't need to say the scientific name. It's a mouthful.
We've learned on this show, Latin and me don't mix. So, so when you are doing this out in the field, are you inoculating this disease onto the soybeans, like out in the field, or are you in a lab?
So it's out in the field. Okay. Yep.
Well, that's so cool. Mm-hmm. I need to get up there more often. Every once in a while, I'm able to pop in and see what's going on at the farm. You have an annual field day every summer. Mm-hmm. That is always really interesting. I was able to learn about the bioreactors and all other kinds of things that you got going on up there. So lots of fun projects. Mm-hmm. We've also learned, I don't know what plant pathology is. I never had to look at it, those words before together. So please explain to me, what is a nematode? Because I am woefully undereducated with this topic.
I will tell you that, just the general concept, or like not concept, term plant pathology can be confusing unless you're like familiar with pathology. I remember one time telling someone that I studied plant pathology, and they thought I said plant mythology, and they thought that was really cool. But then when I was like, oh no, plant pathology, the study of plant diseases, they were like maybe a little less interested. Oh, but anyways, yeah. So pathology, is essentially like the study of diseases. So plant pathology is the study of plant diseases, and there are just like in humans, many different causes of diseases on plants, and we're mostly talking about microbial causes. So as we've identified, we've got, of course, nematodes, that they're like the biggest of the microbes that cause diseases on plants. But we've also got fungi, oomycetes, which are fungal-like organisms, bacteria, viruses, etc. And there's maybe a little debate on whether nematodes should be lumped in with plant pathogens sometimes, because they're kind of like they're almost like a little more like bugs in the way they parasitize things, but I like lumping them in with plant pathogens more, because I like microbes more than I like bugs. Anyways, so a nematode is a roundworm. So we've got our like segmented worms, our annelids, which are earthworms, and worms in that phyla. Nematodes are roundworms, and they can vary greatly in size. So when we're talking about plant pathogens, we're talking about microscopic roundworms. But there's nematodes can actually, I should have looked up the name of this nematode before I got on here, but like the largest nematode ever recovered I can't even remember how long it was, but it's like super long, and it was recovered from like a sperm whale placenta.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
like parasitizing a placenta in a sperm whale. So like nematodes, like, you give your dog heartworm preventative each month. Heartworms are nematodes.
Oh, I had no idea.
Right. So I mean, nematodes can parasitize. I mean, just like any microbe, like there's good ones, there's bad ones. So we've got ones that parasitize things and ones that don't. But obviously in ag and production, and with regard to plants, most of the time we're thinking about the nematodes that are detrimental to the health of our plants.
The longest nematode was 8 meters long.
There, yeah, huge. Like I can't even imagine.
Are they
Ugh.
Yeah.
microscopic thin, or are they
That
visible to
one
the
you would
eye?
have
No,
seen,
yeah,
right?
yeah. That one would have been like bigger around.
So
That's
like
insane.
Yeah, I like the
when,
microscopic ones more.
yeah, oh my goodness. The ones that parasitize humans, like that might get in our gut, is that a nematode? Or is
Well,
that
so like,
just a
their
roundworm?
tapeworms
Mhm.
would not be a nematode. I'm pretty sure there are some like intestinal parasites that are nematodes, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
So obviously, there are good and bad nematodes, correct?
Hmm. And then like
What?
neutral nematodes. There's, the whole scale, the whole,
Swiss, yes. Mhm.
yes, yeah.
Gotcha. So what kind of problems can we see in agriculture from nematodes?
Well, so we keep talking about the soybean cyst nematode, right? So this nematode, so soybeans were originally cultivated in East Asia, and they, bred the beans to be like the productive protein and oil plants that we use today. So they come from over there. And when they first brought the soybeans from East Asia, Japan, and China, the soybeans weren't performing as well as they had hoped, and they decided to, like, sprinkle some or bring some dirt from Japan and China, like sprinkle it on the soil over here to try and like provide that like inoculant. I think they were likely thinking about the root nodules. But in doing so, they brought over this soybean cyst nematode, which is now, I mean, it's for the last 20 years or so estimated to be the top yield suppressing pathogen of soybeans in the United States. So it's a consistent problem. It's one that also is kind of tricky because you can have up to 30% yield suppression without seeing any above ground symptoms on those soybeans. So it's a problem that, like, unless you're like sampling regularly and like monitoring the pathogen population in your field, you might not know it's there, and you might be losing yield and not knowing why. Um, so soybean cyst nematode is kind of the big one. As I mentioned, that's the one that I did my PhD on. But we've also got some important nematodes that affect corn. Some of the, well, I don't know, they're all cool. I was going to say some of the cooler ones, but they're like the bigger nematodes that some of the like longer ones that affect corn that are kind of cool. The dagger and the needle nematodes, specifically Ziphonema and Longidoris. They're really cool. And we've also got obviously nematodes that affect like turf. Their nematodes can be a huge problem on like golf greens, and turf production. And I mean, yeah, there's just, yeah, nematodes that can adversely affect literally any plant, but soybean cyst nematode, it tends to be the big honcho that we really like to talk about.
So it sounds like with like soybean system nematode, you mentioned you have to be testing for this to know you have it. So this is not a windshield survey of the field. This is a go out and dig up a plant and submit a sample to. Who would we submit a sample to?
Well, so you can pull soil cores and submit a composite soil sample to the plant clinic. In Illinois, that's where you would want to send it, is to the plant clinic. They're the ones who process the soil samples, and they'll do a nematode egg count. And it's the process. The processing of the soil lends itself to extracting eggs that are only from soybean cyst nematodes. So they're not just counting all nematode eggs, they're just counting soybean cyst nematode eggs. So then you gain an idea of what kind of SCN numbers you have out there. You can also, like dig up soybean roots and look at them and try to look for the cysts on the roots. But that can be a little more difficult because they are so tiny and tend to get confused with soybean nodules, even though soybean nodules are quite a bit larger. It's just a little bit trickier to just dig up and look, but you can. But soil sampling is probably the best way to go about it. And as far as like monitoring the pest pressure throughout the years.
Illinois is a very long state, and maybe the reason why I have not concerned my brain with nematodes is because I have always thought of that as a southern problem. Does our like gardens, our yards, you mentioned turf grass possibly, like, do we have to worry about that in like central or northern Illinois or southern Illinois, all of Illinois?
So there's all kinds of nematodes to like consider. Like never rule out the nematode, right? Obviously, like the first thing you're going to want to do is, like, if you're seeing like above ground plant symptoms and like no visible like fungal disease or something, you're going to want to like dig up the plant and look at the roots, or like, submit that plant to the plant clinic so they can examine the roots, try to extract nematodes and do their identification. But when it comes to nematodes that we actually are concerned about in like non-corn and soybean plants in the state, I mentioned turf. There's quite a few nematodes that can be detrimental to turf. Are like lesion nematodes, our ring nematodes, spiral nematodes, and all of these are ones that just kind of like cause like a general like decline and like I guess like I don't know, I'm placing anthropomorphic emotions onto plants is a bad habit I have when I'm trying to like describe symptoms. I wanted to say, like, if you're like grass is just kind of looking unhappy, but like, if it's just like, discolored, maybe not like as healthy as the grass around it and like occurring in patches, that would be suspect of some issue in the roots. And it could be a fungal rot, or it could be some nematodes chomping away on those roots. So that's one place specifically that you might consider nematodes in your I guess that would be like landscaping. There's also, this is one of the cooler, no, they're all cool. Sorry, I'm going to say they're all cool. I'm terrible about like when I get really excited about plant pathogens. You should have heard me in my plant pathogenic fungi class. Like everything was cute. Nematodes are also very cute and cool. So there's a nematode that affects pine trees. It's called the pine wilt nematode. That is one that it's not super common, but it's like one to be aware of if you're noticing a decline in your pine trees. And that's one that can only be identified because this nematode actually like colonizes the vascular system of the tree. It doesn't just stay in the roots, it goes up the vascular system of the tree, and it kills the trees pretty quickly. I don't know that there's any actual like management for like stopping the tree from dying. I don't think there is. But at that point, it's more about like identifying the problem and getting rid of that, those materials that are infested with the nematode to prevent it from like spreading to other trees.
So are these mostly like, I'm guessing we have native nematodes in North America,
Mhm.
and we then like soybean
Right.
cyst, that was a non-native nematode.
Right. But
Interesting.
so this is actually one of my favorite like concepts about nematology is that like nematodes are so numerous and like diverse across the world that if you like take away all of the topography of all of the earth, you would still be able to tell like where you're at on the earth based on the like population and like composition of nematodes that are in that place.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's just piles of nematodes
Yeah.
over in, let's say over in Warren County. Yes. So
Yeah.
they've all migrated there. Oh my.
So, with nematodes, is there anything that we can do about them, especially like in that pine tree situation? Can we do anything to prevent them or to get rid of them?
So when like a pine tree is already infected, there's not going to be really any saving that tree. It's going to be more about kind of like exclusion. So that nematode is transmitted by a bark beetle. I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I've thought about Burcephalangus. I'm pretty sure that one is transmitted by a bark beetle. So like, and I don't think the bark beetle is that common. But that one would be more about like exclusion, like, you know, keeping that like vector away. But in like your garden, if you are having problems with something like root knot nematode, which isn't going to be that common, but not wholly impossible. I think the biggest like cultural management that or the best cultural management we can do are like a couple things. First is to make sure that you're planting cultivars that have resistance to whatever nematode has historically been a problem where you're at. And then you'll want to rotate, right? You don't want to plant the same species of plant in an area where you have a problem by a nematode that is known to parasitize that species. And it's similar to like any plant disease, like what's the word? Like you want to like compost or like get rid of any like crop residue that could be harboring the nematodes in future years. And then if you want to get like really extreme, you could do like solarization, you know, just raising the soil temperature for some time before you plant. That helps decrease the number of overall nematodes, but then you're likely causing some sort of detriment to the population of good nematodes out there too. So that one kind of comes with, that one's a double-edged sword.
There's a old remedy I've heard of marigolds exuding a chemical with their roots. Is that, again, I have no idea.
No. Yeah, that's one that I did forget. So marigolds actually serve as a trap crop for root knot nematode, and I think it's kind of like cultivar dependent and like species dependent for root knot nematode. But that it like if you do have a root knot nematode problem, that's like the nematodes will like parasitize and then like die in marigolds over your garden crops. And that was kind of one of the concepts that I was chasing during my PhD with cover crops and soybean cyst nematode. So I can't believe I forgot that option, but yeah.
Well, hey,
yeah.
I better
Good
close my
job,
textbook
Chris.
right here. Close right here.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I learned in Southern Illinois. I did learn a couple things in Carbondale, aside from where to go for the drink deals. So, yeah, the down there, I guess a lot of gardeners plant marigolds for root rot nematode.
Yeah, root knot nematode is something that they do run into in Southern Illinois, and I believe, and unlike soybean production, I don't think yet we have reniform nematode, but that's another one that's, you know, typically thought of as like a southern nematode. But soybean cyst nematode is particularly hardy and can be found all the way up in Canada.
Oh.
And then of course there are like, other nematodes that just live in the soil and do their thing and usually don't get like high enough thresholds to warrant any like real concern about a lot of those.
Between soybean cyst nematode and the non-native lady beetles, boy, soybeans, come on. And oh, what else do I get? I get a lot of aphids and whitefly because my backyard backs right up to a soybean field this year. So, oh yeah, the joys of that. So, but soybean cyst nematode, as you said, that is very species specific to that crop.
Okay. Right. It's kind of like powdery mildews. So the pathogen releases like specific effector molecules that like need to have the right like receptor from the host in order to like form these bonds and relationships for them to like effectively parasitize and get their like nutrients that they need to stay alive.
So did you see it? Does this go up and down over the years? Did you see a lot of like soybean cyst nematode activity this year, 2021?
So there's a couple different factors that affect like the activity of SCN. First thing, we tend to see more SCN yield limitations in dry years. And I think like I would say most of the state wasn't super dry this year. So if there were like any fields in Northern Illinois that have a history of SCN, I would be interested to know, if they saw any, you're going to see yield drops for other reasons too, but SCN can definitely contribute to that in dry years. And then SCN is usually more problematic in fields with a higher soil pH. And so that one, obviously you can predict if you're, again, soil testing and have an idea of the pH in your field. But then the like biggest thing is the fact that we largely manage SCN in the United States with genetic resistance, which is, typically like a pathologist's favorite way of managing any plant disease because it doesn't require any chemical inputs. But so there are 7 different plant introductions, which is like the fancy word for like it's from the soybean germplasm. When they surveyed the soybean germplasm, they identified 7 different plant introductions that have different resistance genes to soybean cyst nematode. And when they decided to start integrating resistance into commercial cultivars, there was one plant introduction that had the smallest amount of yield drag. So it was like easiest to integrate into our commercial cultivars. And so at this point, like 90 or 95% of the commercially available soybean cultivars with SCN resistance have resistance derived from a single source. And so the problem that we have now is that the populations of SCN out in the field are increasingly able to reproduce on that source of resistance. So we're trying to manage it, but we're actually, there are, researchers, and there's people working on other like integrating different sources of genetic resistance now that we've become more like aware of the problem. But yeah, it's one that like you won't really know like how much of a problem it is unless you're like sampling your field at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season to see how the population density changes during the course of the season.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal then.
Yeah.
I kind of, when you're describing that, it reminds me when we learned about systemic fungicides and how they do such a great job of protecting the plant, but they're there ever present. And that means
Exactly.
resistance develops so quickly. So,
I mean, you think about like glyphosate resistance, right? Like, or like any, yeah. So at least we're like finally aware of the problem and, you know, taking action to try and get that back under control. But that is what we call job security.
That's right. That's right. And that's why if you would love to pick a career or make a career change, hey, think about the world of nematodes. Is it nematology? Is that
yep, nematology?
Yep. Nematology, yes.
Yep. Or like plant pathology in general. I mean, there's always going to be pathogens. Like, so maybe you don't like nematodes, but you like bacteria. Like, there's so much you can do in any, like, it's like plant pathology. You know, I was lecturing at Carl Sandburg last week, the community college in Galesburg, and I always like telling the kids about like how like plant pathology, of course, is like its own thing, but there's so many different things that feed into this one thing, right? Like there's agronomy, there's plant science, there's plant biology, nematology, microbiology, virology. Like it's one idea, but they're like, you're never going to be like, I don't think anybody could ever be the perfect plant pathologist because there's just too much to know that like feeds into plant pathology. It's a lot.
You need all of the disciplines so that everyone can lean
on
each other for that.
Yes. And we need like all the people in it. So that way everybody's like expertise can mesh well together and we can, you know, work on problems together and have all the right cooks in the kitchen that we need.
That's right. I'm curious, Chelsea, your background image, is that an infected soybean root?
Yeah, that's a soybean root. I was helping out at the plant clinic a couple days a week last fall, and this was actually a soybean sample that was submitted to the plant clinic, and it wasn't submitted for SCN, but I was, you know, in my examining the plant, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. I found all these SCN cysts on the root, and I was like, oh, they have a SCN problem in addition to who remembers what else was going on with that soybean plant.
That among its many problems.
Yeah. Although are the big ones, are those nodules? The big brown ones?
No, the brown ones, those are the cysts.
Those are the cysts? Oh, wow.
Yeah, the nodules would be much bigger and they're like more like creamy, pale-ish in color.
I didn't know. So are the little yellow dots, are those nematodes then?
Those would also be the bodies of the nematode. So I'm trying to I can't see the pic. Oh, wait, I can't see the picture very well. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to look here. So, well, the smaller yellow, I think that's just like dirt. Okay. The cysts in this picture are like the dark brown ones. They're not like as like round as they would be if like the nematodes were still alive, but at this point the nematodes are dead and their bodies have become like melanized and like the cyst that is SCN.
For people listening, it looks like a root covered in ticks.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it, and that's kind of what happens. I mean, the nematodes enter the root and then they, like, once they establish a feeding site and they stay in one place for the rest of their life, the males, except for the males, so the females, their bodies like start to fill up with eggs and their then like explodes out essentially through the soybean tissue, and then the males actually return to a vermiform or like wormy shape. They exit the root, fertilize the females, and then the females' bodies continue to fill up with eggs to the point where it like squishes her organs and then like kills her. and then her body becomes this like protective structure around the eggs. So the cysts can like one of the things that makes SCN such a good pathogen is that it persists in the soil for years with those eggs protected in the cysts. You can plant corn on corn for like 10 years, go back to soybeans, and there's still SCN out there in that field because the eggs that are in that cyst are that well protected from the environment around it. And a lot of the eggs will only hatch if they detect, a suitable host in the soil.
Wow. It's like a science fiction movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know. This is fascinating, but I want to mention too, Chelsea, you and Katie have a conference coming up, the Crop Management Conference. Tell us a bit about that and what it is, and can people sign up?
Yeah, so every year the commercial ag team puts together the crop management conferences. In 2020 would have been like my first year being a part of these. We had our 4 in-person conferences, and this was all before the pandemic started. And then in 2021, we had to change course to offer the conference online. And that was such a success that this year we are actually, we're going back to in-person conferences. We have 4 locations. Mount Vernon is in January. And then the other 3 are in February, 1 in Macomb, 1 in Champaign, and 1 in Sycamore. But we're also offering an online only version of the conference. And the speakers that we have at the in-person conferences they kind of like vary between locations. So we're going to have a diverse array of in-person presenters, but we have additional presenters that are online only. So, and all of our in-person presenters are going to record their presentations, so they will be accessible to the online only people. So there's going to be really just like a ton of information from a really diverse cast of experts in their fields. And I think in all there's going to be, like 13 or more certified crop advisor continuing education units available. So it's going to be really high value and yeah, just a lot of information. I'm like, I was excited about last year, but I'm even more excited about this year because we have like that much more diversity to offer for anybody who wants to participate. So all of that information can be found on the landing page for the crop management conference. That's go.illinois.edu/CMC 2022. And you can check that out. You can shoot me an email if you have any questions, or give me a call. I'm happy to talk about it. And I'll be talking about this nonstop for the next month and a half.
Well, fantastic. We can leave links below in the show notes. Dr. Chelsea Harbach, commercial ag educator with University of Illinois Extension. You have opened my eyes to the world of nematology. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Chris and Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. You are a wealth of knowledge, that's for sure, about nematodes.
Oh, I will talk your ear off about nematodes and plant diseases any day. Just let me know.
But it's so fascinating, so it's interesting. And Chris, it's always good to see you. Hopefully we can do this again next week with Ken.
We're gonna try. We'll see, folks. The holidays are coming up, so we'll try to see if we can pull Ken away from his commitments. That is just keeping him away from the podcast. I'm pretty sure it goes above Katie and my a pay grade. So, but yes, we do hope that we will see Ken next week for another episode of Good Growing. So listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening, or if you're watching us on YouTube, watching, and as always, keep on growing.